Hey, Cybernaut, just the person I wanted to see. I need a left view of a binary tree in 20 minutes or less. In case you forget, left view of a binary tree is the set of nodes visible when the tree is visited from the left side. I'll be right here watching over your shoulder as you do this. Okay, go. Now. Hurry.
Now, I'm sure there's some people that are like, I know the answer to this question. I can do this no problem. I'm sure majority of people probably be like, I know what's being asked, but it probably will take me maybe longer than 20 minutes to figure it out. It wouldn't surprise me if mostly everybody has never experienced a problem or question like this in their professional lives. Now, to me, this is stressful. First off, you have a time constraint. Second, you have someone watching over your shoulder that you've probably never met before. And they're going to critique everything you do, say, and write. Third, outside of candidates fresh out of college or practitioners of interviewing, you probably never encountered a problem like this before in your professional career. I also don't want you to forget that this is still an interview. So you're already under the stress and pressure of just a run-of-the-mill interview. This is a graph of the Yerkes-Dodson law bell curve. On the x-axis, we have arousal. And arousal relates to the stress and motivation of the task at hand, and performance is the ability to complete such task. Reading the graph from left to right, you'll notice that the lower the arousal, in other words, how simplistic the task is at hand, is a detriment to the performance of the task. This kind of correlates to procrastination. You have an assignment to tie your shoe, but you don't have a time constraint as to when to get done. As we move along up the graph, the more motivation, more stress involved in the task at hand, there is a certain level of optimal performance that is met. As we keep going past the optimal level of performance, we see that the performance goes down given the arousal increases more and more. An example of this could be a task where there's a time constraint, and maybe say you have someone that is watching you do the task that's critiquing what you do, say, and maybe write. And third, assume that this task is a problem that you haven't encountered in a long time since maybe you graduated college. Oh yeah, and let's not forget that you are doing an interview as well. So, Cybernaut, what are you proposing here? Well, you can't change that you're in an interview. That's a given. You can't change that someone's going to be conducting the interview and needs to critique what you're doing, saying, or writing. Third, you can't change the time constraint. They need to know whether to hire you now as opposed to 10 years from now. That works for both you and the company. I don't want to wait 10 years to be hired. The company doesn't want to wait 10 years to hire me. So the one thing that can be changed is the question that's actually being asked. And this is where I would propose that they ask a question that's more in line with the day-to-day work that you'll be doing, as opposed to theoretical trick questions that you probably only ever encountered in your collegiate career. If I'm not implementing how to traverse binary search trees in my day-to-day work, what's a good question that correlates with what I do in my day-to-day work? Well, I would give an example of reading data from a data store and displaying it in the UI. One such example would be, given I have a table of people where there's a first name, last name, and age column, how would I go about retrieving a subset of those people based on a filter on last name? Typically, I'll start off with an in-memory data store with 10 or so person entries within a list. From the simplicity of this question, the candidate will either get it right or wrong. And due to its simplicity, if they get it wrong, then we've answered the question, can this developer actually develop? Referencing the Yerkes-Dodson graph, this is more in line with the left-hand side, where it's a simple task, in other words, tying your shoe, but there's a time constraint. In order to move closer to the optimal performance point of the graph, I will add controlled stressors in the form of additional requirements to the original question. One such example is once they complete the first ask of retrieving the records from the in-memory data store, is to now say, this is a very successful feature. Instead of having 10 records, I need 1,000,000 records, and those 1,000,000 records need to exist in an out-of-memory data store. How does that impact your current solution? Assuming they complete this requirement, I may then ask them to group by age, and then within that grouping, order by last name. If they get that completed, I'll add another additional requirement. I'll do this up until about an hour, and once that hour expires, I don't really care too much about what the end result is. I more care about the journey as to how we got to wherever we ended at. The important key here is that I was incrementally adding requirements to a simplistic foundation. That foundation being a find person question. With the traversal of the binary search tree, you either get that right or wrong. If you get it wrong, you don't really move on. If you get it right, you move on not to an additional requirement of that binary search tree, you move on to a completely different foundation. Maybe it's a linked list, maybe it's an array, maybe you have to sort something. Either way, the foundation and the potential of a stressor where you have no idea how to do something is reset every single time. Now, it could be the job you're interviewing for encounters those type of problems every day, every hour. And if that's the case, I wouldn't want to work in a culture that pretty much has stress 24/7. But that's just me. Maybe you're different. My advice to you is the next time you're on an interview and you get a coding question, ask the interviewer if they've ever experienced a requirement like this in their actual work. If they have, then this is a good question. Proceed. If they haven't, it begs the question, why are you being asked this? From my experience, every time I've asked this question, the interviewer has said, no, they haven't encountered a problem like this in their actual work. The solutions to these problems are typically one-off, never touched again. They're static algorithms. This is in complete contrast with my work experience, where I develop dynamic algorithms that meet requirements of the business needs. The business changes, the requirements change, the code changes. My skill as a developer is to confidently make code changes without introducing regressions. In other words, my performance as a professional developer is based on mitigating risk from my code changes because requirements changed. Unfortunately, typical interview coding questions test your ability to implement static solutions to contrived requirements, instead of engineering a solution to a simple requirement that will get more complex over time. The fine person example I gave earlier in the video illustrates what a good coding question should be. It starts off with a simple requirement, you implement that, and then you get more complex requirements to dynamically shape the initial solution. The fact that you have to prepare yourself for an interview instead of your current job preparing yourself for your next position is disheartening at best. Job interviewing is a completely different skill set than the actual job you're doing. The technical interview is comprised of two components. One is the actual interview, and two are the coding questions. Both require extensive practice and experience to get good at. Both are not experienced as a professional software developer in your current job. I want to reiterate, I'm not asking we abolish interviews during the interview process. What I am advocating for is to change the type of coding questions that are asked during the technical interview process. In a world where books, companies, and entire industries are built around this concept, something feels off. It should be without needing to state to showcase your ability to develop is a result of your practicing as a developer. It shouldn't be from practicing your ability to develop outside your job of developing. This is just my strong opinion, weakly held of course. Please leave a comment below if you want to discuss. I'm open to change, and we all should be. I want to do what's best for our industry, and you should too.